Hello and welcome to the People First channel on Bright Talk. I'm Deb Calvert. For those who are new to Bright Talk, let me do a little logistical setup here for you. First of all, your interaction is very much appreciated. If you're here live, don't hesitate to post a question for me or to let me know what you'd like to dive a little deeper into. If you came in later on demand, well, just email me. I will be happy to interact with you and to answer any questions, clarify anything that might come up. At the end, whether you came in live or on demand, please give me your comments, your suggestions, your ratings so that I know what you want to see in the future and what could be done differently to make the content easier for you to take in. The little button underneath the video that says attachments, that's one of the most important things to know about. One of the things I like best about Bright Talk is that they give you this opportunity to supplement the content. And so I try to do that every time. You'll see a PDF of the slides that I'll use in this presentation. I know a lot of folks like to grab those right at the beginning, some print them and take notes as we go along. I do ask that you respect the copyright. If this is information that you would like to have presented to others, well, let me know. Either we'll work out a permission or I'll come in and make a customized presentation of some sort for you. I'm Deb Calvert, and I am the founder of both People First Productivity Solutions and People First Leadership Academy. I've been an executive coach for over 2 decades, and I've worked in a Fortune 500, started this company, People First Productivity Solutions, almost 17 years ago. And I work with companies to help unleash the potential of people inside those organizations, whether it's through one-to-one coaching or workshops or some sort of customized consultation that we're doing. The aim is always to be able to build organizational strength by putting people first. And that includes individuals. Individuals coming into their own right and recognizing and unleashing their own potential is a big part of putting people first. Organizations that afford opportunities for others to do that are organizations that do a better job of retaining and engaging people. So this series, the one that all 12 topics that are new in 2022 are all about, that the series is called Why Wait to Be Great. It's all about the individual taking control of their own potential. And I will admit, I have had to push myself outside my own comfort zone a little bit for the topics that we are covering this year, including today's. I've thought about this topic and creating a presentation on this topic for several years because it so often comes up in coaching. But I haven't felt entirely safe giving this presentation because I want to be very clear on the front end. I'm coach, not couch. I'm not qualified, nor would I pretend to be qualified in any way, shape, or form when it comes to being a therapist. And the difference between being coach and couch is that a therapist can help you look backwards and diagnose why things are the way that they are. I can't do that. As a coach, what I do is help you accept, okay, here's where things are today. Here's where I'd like them to be. And here are some steps toward that goal. And that's how we'll be tackling today's topic. Today's topic is a really big one. It's all about self-doubt. It's all about the things that you impose on yourself that hold you back. The reason I decided to finally take the plunge and tackle this topic is that it comes up so often in coaching. And I'm not talking about just people who are new in their career. I do coach emerging leaders, but I also coach senior executives. And these self-doubts can creep in at any time. Some people carry them with them throughout their entire careers and cause themselves a lot of excess angst because of these self-doubts that they have. So I'm going to start with this question. Before I go over to the slides, I want you to really be thinking about the question, what if? What if you were not afraid to step outside your comfort zone? What if your confidence were not shaky? What if you weren't afraid of being unmasked or exposed in some way? What if no one else were measuring, monitoring, watching what you do, judging your activities and your outcomes? And what if you knew already that you were good enough, that you were worthy? What would that do for you? What would it create in terms of opportunities that you might have? What would it do if that uncertainty, that feeling that you're always skating on thin ice, what if you didn't have that little voice in the back of your head, the one that says that you aren't ready, aren't able, aren't worthy? What if all of that were out of your way and you could just do the things that you are capable of or interested in doing? Now, self doubt. I think probably at times everyone experiences it in some fashion. And when they do, it can be downright debilitating. We're going to talk about 5 different types of self doubt today. Each one of the ones that I've selected here representing secret struggles that I've seen in a lot of the clients that I've coached. And each one of them becoming an obstacle, something that's in the way of people reaching their full potential or their ultimate goals. As I said, almost everyone struggles at some point in their personal or professional life with one of these forms of self doubt. And we know from research that self doubt can be dangerous to your overall well being because it's not just physiologically harmful, all the stress it causes, all the anxiety, and all of those associated uh, difficulties that come from those. But it's also harmful in terms of being able to live your full potential with spiritual, emotional, physical well being. And because this is a pervasive condition, I think it's something that we should talk about. Unfortunately, in most workplaces, this topic is a little bit taboo. Right? We're all trying to put on the armor that says that we're capable, that we're bulletproof, that nothing can touch us. When in fact, if we could just bring this out into the open and acknowledge that people aren't struggling alone, that there's nothing wrong with a person because they feel this way, well, then maybe we would begin to address the issues by just exposing them to light. Light's what reveals the truth, and the truth is that most self-doubt is orchestrated from memories and histories and emotions that are not entirely valid in the present. So, if you or someone you know or work with might be battling that persistent little voice that keeps telling you how things could go wrong, how you may be taking the wrong course of action, that you may not be ready, those little voices, well, those are all self doubt. And that's what we're going to be addressing. As I said, we'll look at 5 different forms of self doubt. I'm probably splitting hairs when I identify each of them uniquely. There certainly can be a lot of overlap. But just to keep this linear and easy to understand, I'll go ahead and present each of them as if they were on their own, something that you could diagnose and deal with. What I'll do first is describe the self doubt. Talk about what it feels like, what people are experiencing when it happens. Then we'll talk about some strategies for overcoming that particular self doubt. And these are all either based on research or based on things I've done directly with coaching clients, or in most cases, both. And then I'll give you a success story that tells you the before and after about someone who is dealing with that form of self doubt. Remember, I'm looking for your questions along the way, so don't hesitate. Don't wait till the end to post those for me. If you're listening live, whatever question you have, probably somebody else later on who's listening on demand will have a similar question. So if you don't mind carrying the water today and putting those questions up here for me, I really do appreciate that. And I will take them as they come, as they make sense in the overall presentation. So, with no further ado, the first of our 5 types of self doubt is what's known as imposter syndrome. I hear this from a lot of people. I see it from a lot of people who don't even know the terminology, but what they're expressing is, well, in some way feeling like a phony or not being able to give themselves credit, not even being able to accept credit given to them by others. They deny their own abilities. They think they haven't earned opportunities or esteem that comes their way. Back in 1978, two psychologists, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes, they first theorized that imposter syndrome is something that occurs in high achievers who have difficulty accepting their success. And they said that they believe opportunities come to folks who feel this way. Those folks believe that opportunities only come their way by luck or chance instead of that they earned those opportunities. And this imposter syndrome, then as now, it is seldom voiced. It's not very often discussed because people who experience imposter syndrome also have this kind of irrational fear that their inability would then be revealed, that they would be exposed as being this phony. Now, I want to be really clear here that imposter syndrome affects both men and women. I have heard so many people say that this is something that is unique to women, and it absolutely is not. This affects both men and women. It has been shown to affect people across all different demographic groups. That's different ages, different origins, different places in the world, different job levels. In fact, the research that is most recent says that about 70% of the global population have, in some form or fashion, suffered from this phenomenon. And that comes from the Journal of Behavioral Sciences. Now, new challenges, new opportunities, say, for example, in a new job or after a promotion or in a personal relationship, right? New opportunities, new challenges, changes can often trigger imposter syndrome to kick in. And it can be in a limited time. Sometimes confidence catches up to the place where you find yourself. But this is something that happens to others in a way that the feeling can be lifelong, no matter what. So, the three key elements, when you think about imposter syndrome, the three key elements are number one, a sense of being a fraud. And you can imagine how debilitating that might be to think of yourself in that way. But also accompanied with that is a pervasive fear, one that you carry with you all the time of being exposed for that fraud that you think that you are. And the third hallmark of imposter syndrome is finding a lot of difficulty accepting your own success, always looking to credit it to someone else or something else like luck or chance. If what I am describing is at all familiar to you, or if you're observing someone else who often does this deflection and doesn't seem able to accept their own success and seems tentative and fearful, well, here are some strategies that are meant to help overcome this imposter syndrome. And let me just say again, I'm operating in the realm of coach, not couch. Some of these self doubt issues are things that are better talked about with a therapist one to one. So we are at the most high level here, talking in big generalities. And if you feel like this is something that runs a lot deeper, if it's something that you want to peel back and do deep dive into, that wouldn't be me or any other coach. That would be in the realm of therapy. All right, so some tips for overcoming imposter syndrome. Like so many things, number one is to acknowledge that this is going on. Don't accept that you just have this feeling. Certainly don't accept that this is gospel truth and there's nothing you can do about it. But recognize that, like approximately 70% of the population, you might be experiencing this feeling that isn't entirely valid. So you want to talk about it with others who can be objective. Not the folks who are going to tell you that the sun, moon, and stars revolve around you. Not the ones who are going to tear you down and try to make you stay in your lane either. But the ones who are objective, they don't have any hidden agenda either direction. And then this will be hard, but you can do it. Begin in small ways at first to give yourself 3 things. The first 3 things are, first of all, give yourself credit. I did that. I was able to. I figured out. Give yourself credit. Do not go into that conditioned response you have of deflecting the credit. This doesn't mean taking credit away from others, but it means acknowledging your own role in making things happen. Secondly, give yourself grace. Because you are only human, there will be times when you make mistakes. There will be times when you're not the fastest, the smartest, the most capable, and that's okay. Whoever it is that is the best, brightest, smartest, fastest, that person didn't used to be. Giving yourself grace means showing yourself a kindness, not holding extreme, outrageous expectations for yourself, but just calling out yourself the way you would objectively call out someone else. So what? Not the best, brightest, smartest, fastest today, but that's okay. Because the third thing you're going to give yourself is a learning opportunity. In those places where you don't feel entirely confident and comfortable, for those things that you are not the best, brightest, smartest, fastest, you're going to look for the learning opportunity. That's how incremental improvement happens. Acknowledging, I don't know how to do this, is how you get rid of that fear of exposure. Saying, I'm willing to try and learn, I'm looking for some support along the way, makes you feel so much less like a phony. And wrapped around all 3 of those things, the one thing that it takes to make all of it happen is giving yourself permission to fail forward. I'll talk more about that one later, but permission that it's okay to fail, and accountability that when you fail, you'll fail forward. You'll learn and you'll grow as a result of that failure. Couple of other strategies. Here's where a coach can really help you. Those negative thoughts that may swamp you, well, you're probably not objective about those. So start with someone else who will challenge those negative thoughts. When you say, I can't, I didn't, I won't, I don't know how, I'm not good enough, for someone to say, tell me a little bit more about that. Why do you feel that way? And wait a minute, when you did XYZ, it certainly looked like you were capable. How is this any different? When you hear somebody else doing this, it helps you build the mental muscle to do it for yourself. And that is really an important muscle to build. Something else that can help you get a balance is to keep a file. This will sound so silly, but it really does work. But keep a pats and congrats file. For me, it's a hard copy just because something tangible makes this all the more real. The emails you get, the awards you win, the photos of you shaking a hand and receiving a certificate. Put those all into a little file. Your PATS file is what you turn to when you are getting swamped by the negative, when you're feeling like an imposter, when you need something to help you get to a place of better balance. Access that file, take a look at what's in there, and use it to balance out the scales. Now, with each of these, I'm going to tell you a success story. I'm going to tell you enough details that you can understand the story, but not enough details that you'd ever be able to identify who the individual is, because everything in coaching is confidential. So in this case, I'm going to tell you about someone named Howard. When I first started working with him, he was 35 years old. Howard is one of the smartest people I think I've ever met. So fast to be able to put pieces together and form conclusions. He finished grad school at age 24. He had this very rapid ascension in a university system where there's a lot of bureaucracy and it's not that easy to be able to move forward. He was already in a senior management role, and he was next in line to be at the top of his department, who the person in that role currently was his 62-year-old boss who was already talking about retirement. And Howard was also in a committed relationship with, as he said, the woman of his dreams, who he also said was way out of his league. Now, what was going on when he decided to hire a coach is that he was having full on panic attacks. He had an overwhelming feeling. He even had nightmares about the rug being pulled out from underneath him. He was the youngest. He was the least experienced. He was the least educated. He said he was not good looking, not athletic, not wealthy. And that was, of course, pertaining mainly to his relationship. But there was some carryover because he was comparing himself to other people that he worked with. Howard talked to me about some of the things that crossed that line between coach and couch. I tell you this just because he also did hire a therapist, and I would sort of encourage him to take these pieces over to the therapist. But I'm giving you a full picture here. He he told me that he grew up in a fractured family with a lot of dysfunction, in a case of extreme poverty throughout all of his growing up years. He said that everyone felt sorry for us, that they got a lot of handouts. He said it always felt a little bit wrong to take things from others, but when you're hungry, you do it anyway. So the way out for him was education because he had demonstrated this aptitude, this intelligence at a very young age. But here, at this place in his personal and professional life, all of those suppressed feelings were coming back to him. So he sought professional help, as I said, and we decided, he and I, that the coaching would focus on how to identify the goals that he wanted and then how to get from point A to point B. What he decided to do was to mentor teens who were in similar family situations. Somehow, working with those teens and giving them affirming messages about their value and worth caused Howard to see himself in that very same way. Professionally, he would bring to me the positive comments that others gave him, and I would ask him how he reacted, and we would talk about that pervasive conditioned response that he had of deflecting the praise, but accepting the criticism times 10. And we would talk about, well, if not him, who would be ready for that job? And I made him do some objective analysis about that so that he could see himself as worthy and ready for that next level job. Anyways, flash forward 5 years, he not only got the department's top seat, which he absolutely deserved, he was by then very close to earning his PhD, married to that same girl, the one who he said was way out of his league, and ready, he said, at that 5-year mark to become a father. What it boiled down to for Howard was recognizing the symptoms and being willing to explore the idea that those thoughts, those imposter syndrome thoughts, were not valid. And then to being able to do the work to see himself differently. Now, I don't know if what I'm describing exactly resonates with you. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if you have experienced any of these symptoms, if you can recognize them within yourself or within others, please know that they will really hold you back. It's hard to make progress when you have these deep-seated feelings that are in the way. So it's healthy and it's important to find a way, whether it's therapy or coaching or mentoring inside or just doing the really hard work on your own. This is something that does merit your attention. In order to proceed, in order to reach your full potential, you got to get this out of your way. Let's talk about the second of the 5 self-doubts that we're going to cover today. This one is self-sabotage. Now, self-sabotage, it too is more prevalent than most people realize. I've read articles about Abraham Lincoln, Fred Rogers, Michelangelo, John F. Kennedy, and George Washington, and how they all experienced some aspect of self-sabotage before they made history. And if you want to read that same research and hear those stories, look at LEADEM, LEADEM, the research from 2017, and a lot of the stories are encapsulated there. So self-sabotage in psychological circles, that's known as behavioral dysregulation. The thing is, it can be conscious or it can be subconscious, meaning you don't have a high degree of awareness about it. An example of conscious self-sabotage is deciding to eat cake despite having a goal of eating healthy. Unconscious or subconscious levels of self-sabotage, that happens when you have a personal goal or a value and you're undermining it, you're behaving in a way that's not in accord with it, but you don't initially recognize that until someone brings it to your attention or until you have that sort of sudden awareness when it hits you all at once. Now, for example, someone with a fear of failure might wait until the very last minute to work on an important project. In other words, they're unconsciously avoiding the prospect of advancement, right? They're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. I fear failure, so I'm not going to do the work, and then I ensure the fact that I will fail. Chronic self-sabotage, when you're doing this very same thing over and over and over again, well, as you would expect, that depletes drive, it depletes motivation, it leaves people sad and anxious and with a damaged self-esteem. But people from all walks of life do this. People at the very highest levels of business and elsewhere, people at very young ages, this happens all over the place. People are sabotaging themselves by letting negative thoughts spiral out of control. This is all rooted in counterproductive mindsets, including negativity, disorganization, indecisiveness, negative self-talk. Let me give you a very common example. It's insidious, it's ubiquitous. You can probably see this in yourself or at least in someone you know. It is a form of self-sabotage, no matter what you have thought about it being. And that would be turning to mindless distractions that prohibit goal attainment. Mindless distractions that they don't always, but they can include things like binge watching TV, surfing the internet, scrolling through social media, obsessively playing video games, internet shopping. Maybe it's avoiding behaviors like in the workplace, chronically procrastinating, always being tardy, giving up when things get rough, not asserting your own needs and desires. And imposter syndrome, which we just talked about, that can certainly fuel self-sabotage. If you have a strong fear of failure or a chronic concern that you'll be exposed somehow as a fraud, well, then you might have unconscious behaviors like always being late or never speaking up in meetings. In a way, you may be trying to give people a reason to reject you superficially so that you can avoid feeling rejected at a deeper level. Or perhaps you're trying to lower others' expectations of you because you don't feel worthy of the higher expectations they currently have. So, you see what I mean? These are some heady, deep, hard topics today. These are hard for me just as much as they probably are for you. I'll tell you some personal stories before we're all done here. But how do you overcome self-sabotage? Well, you overcome self-sabotage by being aware of it, just like with imposter syndrome. By recognizing that those thoughts you're having, not just that they're there, but that they're toxic. And when you recognize them, you're immediately better equipped to challenge their validity. Part of challenging their validity is to focus on the positives and the possibilities. It's not just the negative thought. No, that negative thought may not be valid. You got to take the next step of what may be more true, what may be more legitimate or real. This is that place where you're giving yourself credit and you're giving yourself grace. You've got to balance the scales and be objective, just like you would be when assessing other people. Okay, to overcome self sabotaging thoughts and behaviors, plan. If you see yourself always procrastinating, plan. Set yourself an earlier deadline. Celebrate when you stick to it. Give yourself those rewards that will build conscious habits. You just do this for 30 days. It'd be like an A B split test. You see how things are now. For 30 days, try something different. At the end of 30 days, objectively measure what's different. How do you feel? What's working? What's not working? And adjust accordingly. I promise you that you can always very, very easily go back to the way things used to be because that's what's coming naturally to you. What you don't know is what could be different if you tried something else. So why not do it? Do it and see what happens. All right, to overcome self sabotage, focus on where you want to go, where you want to be. Think about those outcomes and what would it take to get those outcomes you desire? Because that can be powerful enough to fuel you as you're building these new habits and working on something that's going to take you out of your comfort zone. And catch yourself. It's not just the initial awareness, but long term, catch yourself when you're making excuses to rationalize those choices that take you off course. I'm going to tell you a short story here. It's very recent. I was working with a coaching client who was a little bit of a superwoman. She was going to school. She was in a senior level role in the work that she was doing. She's just an admirable, amazing person. And she was doing some very classic self sabotaging behaviors. When she was able to step back and honestly appraise what she was doing and why, she realized that the self sabotage was mostly directed in one area of her life. This feeling of inadequacy that she had was leading her to be procrastinating, to not finish assignments on time, something she'd never done throughout her academic career, to not really pour herself into the reading and into the research and into the work that was required for her advanced graduate studies degree program. But she realized when she started peeling all of that back that that self-sabotage was largely due to the fact that this path she was pursuing was not what she really wanted. It didn't match her goals. It was something that she had decided to pursue because she thought she was supposed to. And supposed to isn't always valid. No, she made that up in her own mind. And she was a bit afraid of the consequence. What if I don't pursue this? What will people think of me? But the self awareness and the thinking about it, once it was exposed and came to light, helped her to be stronger in her confidence about quitting that program entirely and dedicating herself to things that really did matter to her instead. All right, we're going to talk about risk aversion. Whoops. Risk aversion, well, perhaps a better term would be uncertainty avoidance. This is about anytime you feel uncertain, not being willing to take action, getting to that place where you freeze because it feels risky to be mired in that uncertainty. This happens to all of us at times, right? We have a bias toward the things that are comfortable, easy, familiar to us. We all have some level of resistance to change, even positive change, getting married, getting a new job, moving, having children. All those positive changes are all very, very stressful. We anticipate so much the worst because we have that uncertainty. So we overthink, we catastrophize, we become pessimistic, we exaggerate our own assessment of the risk. We have a desire to stay where we are because there we can understand and know rather than be thrust into uncertainty. To overcome that place where you're avoiding uncertainty, where you're feeling risk averse, you've got to take an equal measure. What I mean by that is you're already doing one side of the equation. You're already doing the the what if I don't succeed? What if this risk doesn't pan out? What if catastrophizing? You're thinking of the worst possible outcomes. To balance that, you'd have to do the what if in equal measure on the other side. What if this works? What if I'm successful? What if this plays out in its best possible way? However far extreme you went on the other side, you've got to go that far extreme on this positive side too. Oh, and don't forget, you also have to look at the measure of inaction because inaction is a choice too, and it's going to be fraught with certain risks. Inaction has consequences. Inaction may have some positives, but you've got to put those two side by side. So you've got risk of action, you're measuring that on both sides of the scale, good and bad. Inaction, measuring that in equal measure, both sides, good and bad, because that's going to help you take a more balanced approach in making a decision and deciding whether or not to take steps forward. But I'd also like to encourage you when you take risks to think about measuring success not just by that ultimate end all be all outcome that you could imagine, but also measuring success of a risk by what did you learn? How did you progress? What effort did you put into it so that you can feel proud of yourself? What's going to be different about you and about the things you do the next time because of this risk that you took? And in this case, I'm going to tell you a personal success story. Um, I started in business nearly 17 years ago, People First Productivity Solutions, but not without great trepidation and a lot of hand wringing and many, many, many self doubts. My family history, both mine and my husband's, in fact, is of really playing things safe, taking the sure, the certain, secure path. We had deviated exactly one time from that certain, secure, safe path, and we deviated in a big way. We moved 2,000 miles across the country to take a job that I was offered at a corporate Fortune 500. And that didn't pan out so well because within 4 years after making that huge, life-changing in every possible way move, the company was sold. And I now had to make a big decision. Do we move again? Do I start fresh in some entirely different career? Uh, what are we going to do? And I had this outrageous idea, the least certain, sure, safe way of all, of starting my own business. And the temptation was just to tuck our tail and go back home to where we knew we were loved and we knew we'd figure out some opportunities. That was very tempting. We almost did it. But instead, I started this business. I had lots of safeties built in, lots of benchmarks. If I don't do X by this date, well, then this was a bad idea. Now, I have to admit, it was all because the company was sold. I had a nice little uh, soft landing place financially. So it created some opportunity for taking that risk. But I had to go way outside my comfort zone. I learned a big, big lesson, some good, some bad. But mostly the lesson was, you know, even if this doesn't work, I can be resourceful enough to figure out the next step when and if I have to. You probably can do the same. We've got two more, and I need to accelerate this just a little bit because the clock is ticking. Perfectionism paradigm. That is anytime you hold yourself to a high degree of performance, probably to a higher degree than you would hold others accountable to. But sometimes this leaks out. Sometimes people end up being micromanagers or unpleasable bosses because they hold others to this perfectionism paradigm too. So let's just agree together to admit that perfection is an impossible standard. It's not fair, not to you and not to others, to hold people to a standard of perfectionism. What's fair is to come to a place where you understand and are okay with good enough, because not everything has to be perfect or even close to it. To get to that place where you can be okay with things not being perfect, what replaces it is being realistic, not optimistic, not outrageously perfectionistic, just realistic. You can time bound yourself. This is one really good strategy. Instead of working in all hours until there is no more time left and you're exhausted, for this, it needs about an hour. At the end of an hour, that's where I'm going to be, and that's going to have to be good enough. So be realistic about what something deserves and allocate that much time and effort to it. Save yourself from burnout by knowing what the true priorities are and by reserving your strength and your energy for what really merits your effort and time. I'm going to tell you about a university that I've worked with for many years. I bring through a group of emerging leaders each year, usually in groups of about 20 to 24 people. And we do small group coaching when we identify issues that people want to kind of form support groups around. And more than once, those groups have been around perfectionism, teaching people, in fact, having them teach each other what it means to do a good job, what good enough looks like, how to save themselves the greatness for the truly big things. And they set some red light, green light, yellow light uh, signals with each other for when to pour it on, when to hold back, and when to make no effort at all. Because actually, there are some things that don't merit any of your time or attention. Giving themselves permission to fail and permission to learn is a big part of this. And the most important piece for that group has been seeking clarity on other people's expectations. This is a group that can run wild in terms of creating big things, creating perfectionism kinds of standards, when in fact, what other people really want from them is nowhere near what they're envisioning. And when they get that clarity, it helps them to stay on track. Much of what we've talked about plays into this last of the 5 things that cause self-doubt. This one's tricky, though. It's all about measuring your worth based on your output, based on what you do and how much you do. You can sometimes be enough, and you can sometimes be awesome and still forget that because you're not looking at who and what you are. You're looking instead at what you do and feeling like you can never do enough. To overcome that, you've got to see value in the fact that you are a human being, and you don't have to put all the emphasis on human doing. Value yourself and who you are and those contributions you make, sometimes just by a nod, a smile, a listening ear. Connecting with yourself and other people is the essence of human being, and it matters greatly. It matters more than anything you will ever do. And the success story I want to give you on this one is, well, something you're probably familiar with. It- Rampant workplace burnout is happening everywhere right now. I believe that it's fueled in part by work from home because we don't have the face-to-face time with people, the real depth of relationships as we exchange chemical oxytocin in being in the same space with each other. Instead, our worth is by how many meetings did we attend? How did we perform on the KPIs? But the truth is, nobody can ever do enough. Nobody can ever do enough. So we've got to get back to this place, this healthy balance where there's more open dialogue, more checking in, more clarifying, more just kind of being there for other people. I just wrapped up a 9-month project with an organization that was so focused on doing that they had completely forgotten about the importance of people. They were in do more mode, and they weren't clarifying, they weren't connecting, they weren't helping each other to be what they needed to be. 2 more things, really quick. Take a look at this, take a screenshot of it, download the slides, make sure you get all the other goodies and attachments that I've put in there for you, because there's tons of content like this and beyond over on People First Leadership Academy. But I told you that you would have to overcome self-doubt, give yourself permission to fail, because failure is a wonderful teacher. Failure is something that you can and will and have survived. It's not a dead end. It's just a detour. You can really redefine everything you do if you see failure as an opportunity for growth. Self-validation is important, whether it comes from redefining failure, whether it comes from someplace else. If your colleagues aren't validating you, if you're not receiving that human being because other people are so focused on perfectionism or human doing or something else, then you've got to create for yourself your own self-validation. You see, everything we do, all the results that we get, they come from a deeper level. They come from experiences you have that fuel your beliefs. Those experiences that fuel your beliefs cause you to make the choices and take the actions that you take. And only when you take the right actions will you ever get the results that you want. So come down to this level of experiences and beliefs. Look for, if it's not coming from other people, it's got to come from you. And look for ways to give that to yourself in all the different ways we've described here. So I'm going to wrap this up because our time has really flown by. I want to encourage you to keep asking me questions if you have them. Just shoot me an email. Meet me on LinkedIn. I've given you all this information in the attachments. Come on over to peoplefirstpotential.com. That's People First Leadership Academy. And let's connect. I appreciate your vulnerability and just even attending this session. I appreciate you asking for this topic because it forced me to take a deeper look at something that, has really benefited me as well. So thank you. And while you're here in Bright Talk, don't forget to sign up for the others in the series, the Why Wait to Be Great series. And please do leave me a review and a comment.